Today's essential question, which is number 1 out of 4 total. Please write this at the top of your notes in the box labeled essential question. How are fossils used as evidence for evolution? How are fossils used as evidence for evolution? Our first left-hand column for this set of notes, the left-hand column, fossils as evidence for evolution. Left-hand column, fossils as evidence for evolution. After the publication of Darwin's book, called On the Origin of Species, interest in evolution soared. Many fields of science began to make discoveries that provided evidence for the theory, and evidence is still being collected today. One of the most difficult aspects of evolution research is that evolution often takes place over long periods of time. This time span is so much longer than one individual could observe in his or her lifetime, but luckily there is a record of life that begins billions of years ago. You know it as the fossil record. Fossils are the preserved remains or traces of animals, plants, and other organisms, and these fossils provide information about Earth's history. Using radiometric dating, scientists are able to estimate a fossil's age based on the known radioactive decay rates of various isotopes, the isotopes that have accumulated in the organism while it was alive. Fossils are also dated by their specific presence in older or younger layers of rock in Earth's history. The fossil record contains data that indicates the groups of organisms that appeared in a sequential nature. For example, the oldest fossils seem to be those of simpler animals without backbones. Only later fossils contain organisms, like fish, that have a spinal cord. And then the earliest mammals are still later in the fossil record. Fossils that show links between species of the past and modern-day species have been discovered. By analyzing and evaluating the fossil record, scientists are able to trace the physical changes in the physical structures of these animals and plants as they evolved little by little over millions of years. For example, scientists have found some fossilized organisms that represent intermediate steps between living mammals and their ancestors. By examining and dating these fossils, scientists have been able to document stepwise changes in the development of the mammalian skull, jaws, and teeth. A similar analysis of fossils has enabled scientists to trace the evolutionary history of the present-day horse, for example. Scientists have also used fossils to support the hypothesis that whales evolved from land-dwelling mammals. Although the fossil record does not provide a complete record of all life on Earth, it does provide extensive and ever-increasing evidence to support the theory of evolution. All right, a new left-hand column, explaining gaps in the fossil record. New left-hand column, explaining gaps in the fossil record. Darwin thought evolutionary change occurred gradually over long periods of time. Observations of the fossil record suggest that evolution is, by human standards, a slow process. However, it also shows that evolution does not take place at a constant rate. Sometimes there are periods of stasis, meaning there's no apparent change, or at least very, very slow change. But at other times, there appear to be rapid spurts of evolutionary change. In addition, as Darwin acknowledged, the fossil record appears to have gaps or to be incomplete. There are sudden appearances and disappearances of life forms. So, when analyzing and evaluating scientific explanations for gaps in the fossil record, it is important to consider all sides of the evidence. For example, does a sudden appearance suggest that a species or body form suddenly appeared? Or was it simply not preserved in the fossil record previously? has it not yet been discovered. In order for fossils to be preserved, certain conditions must be met, and the remains of an organism must experience minimum decay and environmental disturbance. These remains must be buried in sedimentary rock without excessive heat or pressure. Catastrophic events or any other natural events, such as erosion and subduction, can also affect these conditions. And the difficulty in meeting these conditions might explain why many gaps in the fossil record truly exist. One of the biggest puzzles in the history of life is a period called the Cambrian explosion. The fossil record suggests that about 550 million years ago, during the Cambrian period, there was an explosion in the diversity of life. Some argue that many types of animals with different shapes and body plans appeared suddenly. So, how do scientists account for this evolutionary event? Many scientists think that the Cambrian explosion had a number of causes. Now, truly, in evolutionary terms, the Cambrian explosion event was very, very fast. This rapid event took place over tens of millions of years, however, so from our perspective as humans, it is a long time. Rare fossils of soft-bodied organisms showed that complex animals existed before this time. These provided the raw material for the evolutionary spurt. Because some pre-Cambrian and early Cambrian fossils share a few traits with today's living organisms, some scientists argue that these life forms are ancestors of modern phyla. But at this point, the evidence for a direct ancestral link between pre-Cambrian and Cambrian fossils is inconclusive.
The Cambrian period begins approximately 544 million years ago and ends at approximately 505 million years ago. During the Cambrian period, oceans and shallow seas covered most of the Earth. There were 6 major continental landmasses, and they were concentrated in the southern hemisphere. The climate was mild and probably warmer than today. With the world covered primarily by shallow water, marine invertebrates such as trilobites were well adapted for the shallow waters and flourished. There were numerous very clear fossil remains of this unique marine life due to their developed hard shells or ectoskeletons. These dominant trilobites were relatives to modern crabs and scavenged the ocean bottoms.
The sudden disappearance of many life forms in the fossil record just before the Cambrian suggests that a mass extinction event occurred. For those species that survived the mass extinction, new ecological niches became available. This may have led to a rapid event in evolution, which would appear to be a sudden appearance in the fossil record of many different species. The fossils of pre-Cambrian species are rare, but Cambrian fossils are common. The main reason for this is that most Cambrian fossils are of organisms with hard body parts, like exoskeletons and shells. Fossils of the soft-bodied Cambrian organisms are rare. There are a number of suggestions as to why hard body parts appeared at this time. These include the availability of chemicals for mineralization, which is to make hard shells, and an arms race triggered by the development of the first eyes. Recent research indicates that genes that govern critical development processes formed a genetic toolkit that enabled a rapid burst in the diversification of animal life. Our last left-hand column for today: punctuated equilibrium. Punctuated equilibrium. Many parts of the fossil record show the gradual evolutionary change of organisms over time. However, some parts of the fossil record show long periods of stasis or equilibrium in which no or very few new species appear. These periods of equilibrium are interrupted or punctuated with short bursts of speciation. The model of punctuated equilibrium may be useful to explain these observations. Punctuated equilibrium is a useful model for understanding how the fossil record forms. You may have noticed that the idea of punctuated equilibrium fits well with other aspects of evolutionary theory, including natural selection, common ancestry, and the time frame over which the fossil record has been formed. At this point, you should be able to construct an answer to today's essential question: how are fossils used as evidence for evolution? Please press pause at the end of this video and write your answer to today's essential question in the summary box at the bottom of your notes.